Well, welcome to Pursuit of Purpose, where we are sharing our journey from pain to purpose and bringing you along the ride to see how God has really done a miraculous change in our lives. And I am your host, author, and speaker and kingdom writing coach, Indiana Tuggle, and I help people turn their pain, turn their genius, turn their testimony into a book for God's glory. And normally you guys hear from me of how I have come through a lot of ups and downs, trips and turns, a lot of what I've been through, such as molestation and low self-esteem and poverty and whatnot, how I have turned all of that into purpose. And when I say I don't mean I by myself. I mean how God has shown me how he has been able to turn things around for my good. Well, today I have another awesome guest here with me, and she is going to turn her testimony or share her testimony with you guys, and I'm just going to introduce her. Her name is Jacqueline Holness, and she is a journalist with over 15 years of professional experience writing and working for an assortment of newspapers, magazines, websites, and other publications. And Jacqueline has turned her pain of being a single black female into a woman, a married woman of purpose, pursuing that which God called her to be, and she turned that into an author and a public speaker. So I'm excited to have her with me on today so we can talk about dating and developing that relationship with God and dating with purpose. So help me to welcome Jacqueline Holness to the show. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, Indiana. How are you tonight?
I'm fine. How are you? I'm so excited to have you here. And I know I was kind of rambling through your bio because you got so much going on. You guys, if you could see this bio she sent me, I was like, where is the abbreviated version? Because she has a lot going on. She has been busy, busy, busy. So I can't wait for her to share part of her story so we can go ahead and get started. And just tell us a little bit about you, Jacqueline.
Okay, well, as you said, I am a journalist, and the funny thing about that is that I've always wanted to be a writer. Since I learned how to read, I knew that I also wanted to write, and so thank God that God planted that idea early in me as a child, and I went to the University of Georgia where I majored in journalism. And shortly after graduating from the University of Georgia, I did become a working journalist. And I worked at several newspapers and written for various magazines. And back in 2012, I had an idea to write a novel. And journalism is very different from, writing fiction. So I had to basically start from the bottom and learn how to write a novel. And then what the end result was my debut novel, Destination Wedding, which came out in December of 2019. And aside from that, I'm also a fitness instructor. Ran one marathon. I run the Peachtree Road Race, the biggest 10K in the world every summer except for this year because of the coronavirus. It has now been postponed to Thanksgiving. So that's just a little bit about me. My family's from Jamaica, but I grew up here, so I'm a first-generation American, and that gives you some idea of my background and who I am.
Awesome. Well, Pursuit of Purpose is all about sharing our journeys and how we ended up taking the pain, or what shall I say, the lemons that life thrown our way, and how we turned that God turned that around for our good. So give us a little bit of insight into Jacqueline, the single woman, that kind of led you to begin even writing that book, Destination Wedding.
Well, what happened, okay, so let me just go back to the very beginning of my journey. When I was in my 20s, I'm 46 now, but when I was in my 20s, I did not necessarily want to get married right away. I had sorority sisters and friends who were getting married, and I thought it looked a little bit early to be getting married. But I did think as I was getting closer to 30 that I would like to meet someone and get married. My mother, she got married at 30 years old, which is a pretty older age for that time period. And so I thought that as I neared 30 that, I would like to get married. But as it turns out, even though I wanted to get married at 30, I didn't get married until I was 39, just a month before my 40th birthday, as a matter of fact. So anyway, once I did turn 30 and I realized that I had no prospect in sight, I decided, well, let's handle this. And I'm a very take charge type of person. So I started, reading books about, how to date. I started making sure that I was paying attention, because prior to that, when I would just hang out with someone, it was just, for fun, just dating for fun. And now I decided, okay, I'm going to actually date with a purpose, and see what their intentions are. And despite my best efforts, 8 years, well, no, I won't say 8 years. I say 6 years went by, and every relationship that I had just seemed to disintegrate within a few months. And so I was just very, very frustrated. I felt like I had done a lot of work on myself. Like I said, I read all these books. I had worked with various counselors. I went to church service. I prayed. I fasted. All these things that I did. Of course, I read the Bible. Everything I could think of to do, I felt like I had done. And I remember in December of 2009, I had just broken up with this guy, or this guy had just broken up with me, rather. And it was a relationship that I really wanted to work because we had tried dating a few years before. He had just gotten out of a marriage, and so he really wasn't, available for a relationship. But by then, a few years had passed by, and so now he had healed from that relationship, and so now he was ready to really seriously date. And so we dated for a good 2 to 3 months, and then he decided that we just weren't compatible that way. So I was devastated. So December of 2009, it was the Christmas season, and as you probably know, the Christmas season, even though it's about Christ, it's also a very romantic season. It's cold outside. Everybody wants to snuggle up. People are going to Christmas parties and looking really cute, and, people are buying each other gifts. And so that Christmas season came, and I just felt very, very lonely. But it was almost the end of the month by that time, and I thought, well, it's almost the New Year, and if I could just make it to the end of this month, I'll be okay. And so, but I didn't. A report came on ABC News Nightline. It was called Single Black Female and Plenty of Company. And it talked about how 42% of black women weren't getting married, and it focused in on women in Atlanta specifically. And they interviewed this one woman who, at the time, she was a Atlanta Falcons cheerleader. She was also running for state court judge because she was an attorney in the metro Atlanta area. And they interviewed all these various dynamic and beautiful women. And I thought to myself, wow, if a woman who is an Atlanta Falcons cheerleader who is running for a state court judge can't find a man, then what hope is there for me? And so I was just distraught at this point. I said, oh, my gosh, I cannot believe it. Little did I know, though, that I would start dating my husband 2 months later. And so when we started dating, though, that report stayed with me. The devastation that I felt seeing that report stayed with me. And I decided, what if I wrote a novel about these fictional black women who are similar to me in some respects at least, and what if I decided to write about them and how they responded to the report? And that's how Destination Wedding came to be.
Awesome. So it's a fictional book, but you kind of base it on some real life statistics that could really truly happen with women who were single and professional and things like that.
It is a fiction book. It is a novel. However, as you stated, it is based on a real statistic that, 42% of black women have not been married. And I also tried to incorporate as much as much realism as I could in the book. A lot of people have said it reads like a nonfiction book in some respects.
Mhm. So tell us, what are some of those lessons that you learned over your 10 years of not having any prospects that you included in your characters in that book?
Well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is that, in the 10 years that I was dating, I was able, because I had this very lengthy list, and this was also mentioned in the report. I had this very lengthy list of what I was looking for in a man. But as the 10 years went by, I was able to distill that list into a few qualities. And then once I was able to see these are the qualities that I absolutely have to have, I was able to broaden my horizons about who would actually be a suitable candidate, because I thought that person had to be a certain type of person, when in actuality, if they had a few key traits, then all the other stuff I could just leave up to God. And so that was one thing that I tried to convey in the book, that if a person has a few key traits, then everything else you can leave up to, the surprises of life, I guess to say.
So basically, you were saying that when we look at our list, and I talk about that too in my book, Save Single and Frustrated, is when you look at your list, you have to know what are your deal breakers and what are your must-haves, and when you look at your must-haves, everything else you should be able to compromise on it, or everything else shouldn't be important. And I feel like that when people date nowadays, that list is such a defining factor that people don't really take the time to get to know people. It's almost as you're having dinner and you're sitting down with somebody with a notepad that's just sitting here asking you questions and checking boxes off a list. And you're like, but what about the person? What about the personality? And sometimes I feel like as men and women, that sometimes that list can cause you to put not only the person in a box, but also can put you in a box, because you can come off as somebody that you're really not, based on those items that are on your list.
I agree with you. I think a list is, like, for instance, if you decide, okay, I would like to get married, I think a list is good to kind of get started on your journey, to kind of weed out the totally undesirables. Because for me, in the beginning, I guess I'll just have to be blunt, I was led most of all probably by lust, if I had to be honest. And not to say that you shouldn't be attracted to your mate, because you absolutely should, but you should gauge where that attraction comes from. And so my list in the beginning of my journey was able to help me weed out the total undesirable, so to speak. And then once I had been on the journey for a while, these were I knew that there were qualities that I needed, but I kind of kept them in the back of my mind and allowed God to unwrap the gifts that He presented to me as I dated. So,
absolutely. I've found that on the couple of times that I've been out on dates, and you meet people, and it makes you kind of feel impersonable, and even me, with me knowing that I have my own set of preferences and values and things like that. But when you meet somebody and it doesn't work out because, oh, you do this and you do that, and I don't like people who do this, and I'm like, you didn't even have a conversation with me about it. You was just like, I don't like women who do this, so I'm moving on to the next one. And I was like, wow, it really it really kind of makes you kind of pause, and it makes you feel like inhuman almost, for it, and not to and not to down anybody for their preferences, because we all have them. You all have something that you like, some things that are deal breakers, but there are some things that I feel like can be compromisable, that I feel like love can make people change.
Mhm.
That people really, really overlook the power of the one, the power of the right person, and how they can come in and help make your life better. Because when you have love on the side, you almost change anything for the right kind of love. So
Well,
I feel like, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, so I feel like some things that we have on a list that we're sticklers for, we're overlooking, and then we're allowing them to make us miss out on a really good person.
I agree with that, and I read in some book years ago that sometimes the lists force you to count people out when you should make your best effort to count people in, and so that really stuck with me because it is important to have some things that you're looking for, but if you're constantly saying, okay, no, he doesn't fit, no, he doesn't fit, no, he doesn't fit, well, who fits? You know, so you do have to look for reasons to count someone in rather than count them out.
Absolutely. What's another lesson you learned?
Let's see. What is another lesson that I learned? Well, there is a scene in my novel which talks about the women and how they dress.
Mm-hmm.
And one woman in particular wanted to redo her wardrobe because she noticed that most of her wardrobe was business-oriented and not really oriented toward dating. And so I have a girlfriend who, when we first met her, most of her clothing were business suits. And so we had to help her to incorporate more fun clothing in her wardrobe because, yes, you can meet a man on the job, but you can't, well, I wouldn't recommend wearing a business suit on a date unless you were just meeting for lunch and you just happen to be in your business suit. You have to, look like you want to flirt, and sometimes that means wearing bright colors, wearing things with frills, looking girly. I mean, I don't mean to be chauvinistic or old-fashioned, but I do think that as a woman, you have to present yourself in a womanly way, and that means, taking time with your appearance, wearing bright colors. I do think, those are lessons that I learned in my journey to really pay attention to how I presented myself as a woman, if that makes sense. So that's another lesson that I learned.
That's a very interesting point with it, because today there's a lot of conversation around feminine energy. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think about your feminine energy, if it starts with your appearance, how you dress, how you wear your hair, whether or not you're smiling, and if you think about your attire, it does kind of make sense that when you're going out on a date, people do want to see the after five to make sure that you're, as you said, flirtatious, that you're going to have fun in general, because when you think about the business suit and what it represents, that level of professionalism, that level of sticking to the rules, and being cold, and being having everything together, making sure that you say the right things and do the right things, and being mindful of how what you're speaking is being portrayed to everybody in the room. If you think about a boardroom meeting, when you think about that, that's not really fun date at all.
No, it's not. No. And women, like in modern society, and I agree with this to an extent. We're told that we have to be a boss, and I agree.
Mm-hmm.
You should be about your business, But when it comes to male and female relationships, I do feel that you should present yourself as a woman, And so that may mean that you are not wearing black unless it's a black dress. You know what I mean? That may mean that you put on perfume. That may mean that, you wear earrings that swing. You know what I mean? Things that make you look like I'm a woman and I enjoy being a woman. And so, I want to be with a man. If that makes sense.
Right. So how did you really discover that your attire made the difference in the type of feminine energy that you were putting out there?
That wasn't my specific lesson, but I've noticed that others have had to learn that lesson, because I think I've been pretty good. And I've been told that over the years. I have one friend in particular who she is a very ethnocentric dresser, and she commented on the fact that I always tend to dress flirty. So that was not my particular lesson. But I have watched other women learn that lesson, and I think it's an important lesson. And that does not mean that you abandon how you dress. I don't want someone to be someone else. But what I'm trying to say is that you have to incorporate, like as you said, as you put it so well, it's the feminine energy. You know what I mean? You expect a man to bring the masculine energy, so you have to bring the feminine energy.
Absolutely. There's nothing that beats the softness of a woman, in the presence of a man, and things like that. So you do have to be mindful of the energy that you're putting out there, and because nobody wants to. Even if and there's a lot of attire that we have now that we look at that could work both ways. When you want to go from the office to happy hour, what do you wear that when by the time you make it to happy hour, you don't look like you just came from work, so that you look like you're ready for a good time and you're ready to have fun. It doesn't mean, now there's a thin line between classy and trashy. Doesn't mean that you go.
I'm not trying to tell you to get trashy. Just accentuate what you have going on, just accentuate your femininity, however you see fit, and as you said, in a classy, not trashy way.
Absolutely. So tell us, tell us about the 4 women in the book?
Okay, well, they are 4 very distinct personalities, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to make sure that I included a cross-section of women. So we have Jorana, who is the religious woman in the book. She owns a PR company, 85 South Public Relations. It's a hip-hop PR company. But she also has this conflict with her faith because she's representing various rap artists who probably wouldn't be call themselves Christian, but yet she does represent them. And at the same time, she is a Christian. So she has a conflict going on in her professional life, as well as in her personal life. In her personal life, she's finding it hard to meet men, but she's a very take charge kind of person, and it has worked out in her professional life. But her personal life, she's having some issues, basically tied to some splits in her personality. As I mentioned, she has, on the one hand, she's representing these hip-hop artists who aren't Christian. On the other hand, she is a Christian. And so that's one character. And then we have Mimi, who is the wild card in the bunch. She is a radio DJ. She is known for her antics. Although she is an educated woman, she speaks in a lot of slang, so she kind of throws people off because she is educated, but she does speak in a lot of slang. She is crazy. She's willing to do whatever she needs to do in the moment. She doesn't give a lot of thought to what she does in the moment, and so she causes a lot of surprises to happen in the book. We also have Whitney, who is a married character. She is an attorney. She's married to an OBGYN. She is my Southern belle, because it is in the South, so you have to have a Southern belle in the book. So she is, what you would probably expect, from a woman who's from the South, who lives in Atlanta. And then let's see, who else do I have here? Sometimes I tell you what, you write your characters and then you can't remember everything when you need to. Let me see here, my other character. Okay, so I've told you about Jorana. I've told you about Mimi. Sonalda. I haven't told you about Sonalda. So Sonalda is the boss that I was referring to earlier. She wears business suits. She's most comfortable in business suits. She's always wanted to be in business, so her whole persona exudes, I am a take-charge woman. She is very project-oriented. And the ladies, they start a project called Destination Wedding, and that's to meet and marry men in a year. And so she has determined that she is the project leader. She is very goal-oriented. So she says, this is my goal. She will do whatever it takes to meet that goal, and she is very competitive. And as a result, she is very rigid in her thinking. So those are my characters.
Awesome. And what are some of the issues that they had to encounter on their road to get married in a year?
Well, as I mentioned before, with Jorana, she has this split personality. On the one hand, she's very religious. On the other hand, she's not. And so this stems from some issues that she has that happened to her from when she was a child. She has some family issues that come up. I won't reveal anything more than that because that would be telling you, that some of the surprises in the book. You have Sonalda, who, because she is a very take-charge woman, does not work in her personal life, and so she comes up against her need to always be in control, even when it comes to, meeting men. And it's funny because the skills that you employ in meeting goals, professionally, you kind of have to turn it on its head to meet your goals in love. I mean, because so much of love is something that you can't control. So even though you can have personal goals for yourself, when it comes to love, you have to make room for things to just spontaneously happen. So Sonalda has issues with that. Because Mimi is so crazy, when you are a crazy person and you can do anything at any moment, of course that's going to show up in your love life. And so she makes a lot of crazy decisions. And my Southern Belle character, Whitney, she's already married, so she's not trying to get married. She's actually the project consultant for her friend's Destination Wedding project. And so as the friends discover that even though she is the project consultant, she does have some issues within her own marriage. And so I've included her as a married person in the book so that people wouldn't think that I was pitting single women against married women, because I do think that as a single woman you can have issues, but don't think that once you get married you have no issues. It's just another set of issues that you will have to deal with as a married woman. So that's basically,
awesome.
Some of the issues they come across in the book.
It sounds like an awesome book. Now, I'm sure you get this a lot, as most fiction authors do get this a lot. So which of the characters are you? Or is it a combination of them?
I can't reveal that, but just suffice it to say there's a little bit of me in every single character.
And which character
That's all I can tell you.
Which character did you struggle to develop the most?
Probably Whitney, because she's the least like me. She's really bougie, and I'm not. My husband says I am, but I'm not. And so that was really difficult because I just don't think the way that she thinks. But I really try very hard to think like I thought that she thinks, and I think I was able to do that. So, but she was the most difficult.
And who was the best one? Who was the one that you had the most fun writing?
Well, I had fun writing all of them, but obviously, if somebody's crazy, you could do anything. So Mimi was a lot of fun because she's so crazy. But I had fun writing each one. Each of the characters was fun writing, even if it was difficult. For Whitney, it was still fun to write about her in spite of the difficulty.
Now, back to your own personal story. Did you find that it was difficult to navigate from being single to being married, considering that you were single for a long period of time?
Yes, it's a whole other education. Now, as of August, I will have been married 7 years, and so I've had to unlearn a lot of things and learn new things, and it's been a learning journey. I mean, it's funny, I read this somewhere that if you tend to be happy as a single person, you'll be, happy as a married person. And so I found happiness being single, and I've also found happiness being married, but it's a whole other set of rules that I've had to acquire, and I'm still learning. I mean, I grew up with 2 younger brothers, right, and a father. So I know how to be around men, but I've never been married to one. So it's a whole other education, learning to actually how to be married to a man versus how to relate to them as just your father or your brother. So it's been very interesting to see how men work when you're actually connected to them as your husband versus your brother or your father.
Can you give us an example of that? Because that sounds interesting.
I'm trying to think. Well, okay, for instance, if my brothers are getting on my nerves when I was growing up, I would just say, well, just leave me alone. Get out my room. I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. And thankfully, because there was 2 of them, they could just play with each other. I'm the oldest. But, when you're married to your husband, you can't say, get up out of here. Leave me alone. You have to work with them. You want to be in relationship with them. You have to work with them. So when you are mad with each other, you have to figure out a way to make it right. You can't just say, don't talk to me. I mean, of course you're going to have moments where you don't want to talk to the other person. But, if you can continue to do that over the long haul, you would not have a good relationship. So you have to figure out a way, well, how can we make this work? So that's one thing I've had to learn.
And, it's funny that you mentioned that one as your example, because that is one of my greatest fears as a single, and in dealing with or meeting a lot of single women who are still single later, after 35, 40 years. I'm 43 and still single. But the longer that you're single, you begin to get so stuck in your ways and so used to having that alone time. And that's part of my personality. As an introvert, I tend to do that. I tend to like my me time. I tend to like being, alone. So a lot of people always ask me, well, what are you going to do when you get married? You ain't going to be able to tell your husband to I'm sorry, what'd you say?
No, I'm saying just be yourself, because I'm an introvert too, and I need alone time, and my husband needs alone time too. So a lot of times he's in his man cave, and I'm up in my office, and we'll be that way for a whole afternoon, and then we get together that evening. So that's where it comes to God matching you with the right person, because God knows you're an introvert and you need your alone time. Yeah.
Yes, because I'm like, I tell people, I say, I don't know, I would not be a happy person if I had to be under somebody 24/7. I think it would just it wouldn't be good for neither of us, to have. I mean, you have your moments when of course you want to be up under them, but there are also those moments where you're like, you know what, I'm good. You go do you, and I go do me. And I think that, as like you said, if you have somebody who is you're just compatible with, all of that will fall in line. And a lot of times when people ask me that question, it's because they're the opposite, and I'm like, I ain't trying to date you, or something like that. But it's a lot of times we project our own personalities and our own insecurities off on other people, and it sounds unrealistic, but in reality, no, that's all part of compatibility. There's somebody, out there for you that is going to be that not perfect person, but that perfect match, that you'll be able to, like you said, be yourself, be who you are, and let the chips fall where they may. I think we, like I said earlier, we make it harder than it is. Dating is
Yes,
so
you're
hard
right.
now.
I do. Yeah, you're right. That's one thing. As I was dating, I noticed that my husband to be at the time, I noticed that he had great respect for the fact that I need time alone to write or just to think. Just the way he responded to when I would say things that had to do with my writing or whatever. I noticed that he had great respect for that, and so that made him a keeper in my mind, because I noticed that he respects that. And he is still that way today. He very much respects the time that I like to spend alone. I mean, he likes to spend a lot of time by himself as well, but when it comes to the fact that I'm a writer, he really respects that I do need time and space to be with me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Is there anything else that you wanted to relay to the audience before we get out?
Well, just as I said, I am a journalist by trade, and I also blog. I have a blog, afterthealtarcall.com, in which I blog about pop culture, relationships, a lot of topics, careers, whatever comes across, my mind, but basically pop culture. But I have a lot of relationship type of articles on there, because for whatever reason, people tend to want to read when I write about relationship type of matters. So my website, afterthealtarcall.com, is where you can find anything you need to find out about me. So I did want to say that.
Awesome. I mean, relationships are kind of really big now, especially when it comes to the pandemic that we have going on right now. Relationships have kind of been pushed to the forefront because people are spending more time together than they anticipated now. And then also with, as you said, that statistic is still growing. There are still a number of women who are still single and desire to be married. So do you have any advice for those women?
Well, okay. Everything that I learned, I poured into my book, Destination Wedding. And, I hate to be like, read my book, but I am saying read my book, because everything that I have learned, that I learned in my journey, I poured into the book. Aside from that, reading, literature that applies to relationship, I would say that ask God to show you what to do. I'm a Christian, so I'm always say start with God. And God will show you exactly what you need to do as far as where to start. For me, it started with getting a mentor, someone who I felt could advise me about relationships. I work well when someone is working with me one-on-one. So that was one of the first things that I did, was to get a mentor. But each person is different. Each woman is different. So, but, I guess that's the best advice I can give for the start of the journey. There's more things I could say, but that's how you at least start off on the path, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. You definitely have to start with God, because God is the one who can see what we can't, and especially when it comes to nowadays preparing the single woman for marriage, or preparing you to be the queen, or preparing you to be the wife. That is hot topic nowadays. That is a whole business model for some people, and I'm not pouring salt on anybody's business, but I feel like we have to get back in relationship with God and allow Him to lead us. I know when I wrote my book, Saved, Single, and Frustrated, that was the reason that I was so frustrated, is because I kept going to so many different people and magazines and books and everything for advice, and trying to figure out, why am I single and why can't I find anybody. And when I finally sat down and got in the presence of God, and he had to show me, and I learned that even though I wanted a husband, I wasn't ready to be a wife. There was some things
Mhm.
in me that I needed to work on, that God needed to work on, and there were some areas that I needed to heal. And when we mentioned the list, one of it was how the things got on the list. So for
Mhm.
many people, we create these lists and we don't even know how they on them and why they're so important to us. And at some
Right.
point, if you don't know why something is important to you, then you don't know what it looks like when it's presented to you. So you're sitting up
Right.
here asking for something that you have no idea what those characteristics look like. And then a lot of times we're asking for something that we're not even ourselves. Like spirits attract. So if you're asking for something in somebody that you can't exhibit yourself, why would they be attracted to you?
You're right.
So we
You're
have
right.
to in making, those lists and trying to look for the perfect person, we have to make sure that we're busy being the right person. Would I date me? Would I marry me,
Mhm.
right now? And if you take an honest look at yourself and see that you're not in a place where you need to be, whether that's mentally, spiritually, financially, professionally, wherever the gap is, begin to work on that. And then as you grow, the right person will come along. Because I was telling a friend today, nobody wants to get into a parked car. It
Mhm.
needs to be going somewhere. It
Right.
has to be
Right.
going
Exactly.
somewhere. And let us know where we're going. You have to be clear on where you're going, in order
Right.
for somebody to agree to take that ride with you. So that would be, my advice is to not to and I've gotten to the point to where now God has been getting on me on reminding him how many years, because I'm always, God, I've been single for 8 years. I've been abstinent for 8 years. How long must I wait? He's like, why you keep reminding me how long it's been? So we
Right.
stop holding on to, all these years and counting the time, because it's adding
Right.
to our frustration and it's taking away from our own happiness. You can't be,
Right.
how can you be happy with what God is doing in your life if you're constantly reminding him on, this is year number 8, still ain't married. This is year
Mhm.
number
Mhm.
such and such. I still don't have this. I still don't have that. Especially when you're talking to the author and the finisher of time. God is time. So while you
Mhm.
count them years in his head, you may be on 8 years and he gonna date 8. So
Exactly.
you making
Exactly.
you making
Mhm.
yourself, you're making the time prolong yourself by focusing on the wrong things. Focus on being the best you. And when you're the best you, you put out the best you out there to attract the best you to you. So and that would be my advice, is to be the best you that you know how to be. And if you find that there are some areas that need to heal, that you need to grow, then focus on that and pursue that. Pursue wholeness with every fiber in your being, because God doesn't put two broken people together. I don't care how many memes we got out there that says he loved me past my brokenness or he loved me through my pain. That's a lie from the pit. Nobody wants to be with nobody broken.
Mhm.
No,
Mhm. Mhm.
nobody. That's not fun. That struggle love is not fun at all. So work on you and be the best you that you know how to be in this season, in whatever season that you're in. Be content and happy in that, and the best will come, and before you know it, you'll end up not even paying attention anymore. And when he comes, it'll be a surprise. You'll be so busy, you'll be like, who are you? And where you come from.
Mhm.
You know, that's my biggest dream, that I'll look up one day and he'll be standing beside me and say, "Hey, girl." I'll be like, "Who you? How about who this man?"
Right. Not the color purple. Okay.
Yes, and so I love that about just relaxing and being in the presence of God and putting God first. And it sounds so simple. And it, but it's really, it sounds hard, but it's really quite simple if we learn to focus on God and our relationship with God and being who He called us to be. It would be, life would be so much simpler. It really would be. Um, I thank you so much, Jacqueline, for coming and chatting with us about dating and relationships, and talking to us about your book, Destination Wedding. How can we get the book? Is that on the site as well?
It is, but you can find on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the various on time. On time. Yeah, it is on time, and it's online as well. Just look at, just Google it, and you can find it. So.
Awesome. So be sure to go out there and grab your copy of Destination Wedding by Jacqueline Holness. And when you get it and read it, write her a review. Don't just give people a book and don't write no review. Leave a review and let her know how you enjoyed the story.
Yes, please do.
Please leave us a review. We work hard for to put these stories out there and these books out there. We need to hear from you guys. We need to hear how you enjoyed the book. So that's the best thing that you can do for an author. Besides buy the book, write a review and tell somebody else about it, how you enjoyed it. That's
yes,
the best
please.
thing you can do for us. That's the best thing you can
please.
do for us.
Thank you for mentioning that. That is true. Very true.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for joining us on Pursuit of Purpose. As you know, you can always get in touch with me and leave me your thoughts and your concerns at pursuitofpurpose2019@gmail.com. Again, that's pursuitofpurpose2019@gmail.com. And as I always say, please remember that there is purpose in your pain.